Now that Trump was declared president-elect last week, we're thinking about what it will mean for the tech community. He's taken a pretty strong stance against immigration, particularly illegal immigration, and a lot of people are wondering what this means for H-1B visas, the high-skilled visas that a lot of engineers and other high-tech talent use here. Are you concerned about what this means for your portfolio companies?
Absolutely. We're thinking about it a lot. I think the stat is 50% of companies that are founded here are at least one of the founders is an immigrant of some sort, and that carries through to our portfolio. I've done 3 deals this year. 2 of them are with founders who are here on H-1B visas. So when I think about that impact, in my firm and in the broader community, it's pretty big. I think the risk, though, is we don't know what Trump's going to do. He's come out on one side being pretty against immigration, and we could really see him cut back the number or even place tougher restrictions. On the other side, he said we want to keep talent that's been in universities here from fleeing the country. So it's kind of a big open question.
I would agree. I think we just don't know. And you would think rational heads will prevail in the end, that immigrants are, they fuel our economy. There's a lot of innovation they end up creating, especially here, and that mostly does good for our country despite the, all the rhetoric in the elections. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm optimistic that we'll end up in the right place around H-1Bs as it pertains to Silicon Valley itself.
I mean, the other factor with that too is it's not just about founders, it's also about a lot of early employees. And it's challenging enough to hire in these tech roles. And we do have a shortage of engineers and STEM graduates every single year. And so the backfill is really coming from a lot of H-1B visa holders.
And then when it comes to privacy, there's also some concerns there. In particular, he got into a big debate with Apple. He didn't like that Apple didn't want to turn things over to the FBI. There was that whole backdoor situation. And so now people are wondering if that means that their data is going to be safe, if there's going to be more government surveillance. Do you think we should expect that?
Terrorism is something that really fuels a lot of the base that that helped bring him into office. And so I think you actually have a core of folks that are not against that. And so that certainly will be something that was a major part of his platform, right? So I can see how privacy and access is actually going to be heavily debated over the next year or so.
Yeah, both for, as we've seen in politics and in American business, cyber terrorism is a huge issue. So I know he's going to want to work on addressing it. We never debated these things in the debates as to what his stance is. If the Apple FBI issue isn't an indicator, he would actually say give government more control, which would mean he'd be for reduced privacy, and that goes against a lot of how entrepreneurs think here in the way they build the company. So I could see that being a tension that develops over time.
Well, Republicans are generally labeled pro-business, although Trump has changed his position on a lot of things. One would think that he'd be in favor of M&A and reducing regulation there, but he came out against AT&T, Time Warner, possibly because he doesn't like CNN. So we don't know exactly what will happen, but in general, do you think he'll be good or bad for M&A?
Well, I think if the corporate tax rates get lowered in the way that he's proposing, that potentially frees up a lot more capital to be investing in acquisitions. So that could be a benefit to that proposal. Right?
Also, the repatriation of capital, if that comes from overseas, that should accelerate M&A as well. So I'm hoping this will actually catalyze more M&A because there's a lot of cash sitting out overseas for our big tech companies.
Yeah.
What about IPOs? It looks like Snapchat is going to go through and do their IPO. And do you think that will lead to more IPOs, or do you think some companies are going to be cautious about going at the beginning of this administration?
I can tell you the companies that we're sitting in the boardrooms with that are considering IPOs, that's not a big factor that we think about, and I think things should settle down over the first couple of months once we start to better understand what the agenda is. I do think his policies do impact different sectors in terms of how innovation and companies that are getting built today do get impacted, whether it's it's healthcare where he's got strong views, or energy where he's got strong views, or fintech. For different reasons, by the way. Some places too much regulation is bad. Some places too much regulation is good. It's just I do agree it's unclear as to what the real stance is, but knowing how that regulation landscape overall settles down will impact how you think about investing in those sectors, because Silicon Valley has become more active investing in these areas. But as far as companies that are ready to go into public markets, I think we should be okay there.
So there's been a lot of talk about job creation, particularly in the Midwest. Is there anything that VCs can do to create more jobs in other regions?
Yeah, to me, job creation is the core issue that's been highlighted in this election that's swung it, contrary to what everybody thought here. And I think that's a place where we need to collaborate with DC in figuring out what the right answer is. My worry is, as founders in Silicon Valley, we generally work on problems that we can relate to. And most people here can't really relate to what those problems is, as highlighted by this election. And my other worry is that in DC, we're thinking about how do we create regulations so jobs aren't leaving the country in an effort to bring back anti-competitive jobs. The reality is whether we create robotics and AI that eliminates a lot of these jobs that we're concerned about becoming obsolete, or the rest of the world, is this going to happen? Market forces are going to drive it there. So to me, it is about, as you were saying, what is the next generation of skills that are required? How do we retool our education system so the entire country can be prepared to take advantage of the kinds of jobs that will be created and accelerate our move towards that, rather than having a backward-looking strategy. And so it is important that we end up collaborating with DC in this regard.
We have a huge skills gap, and a lot of that is in the middle of the country, and a lot of the jobs in the new economy are going to be more technical jobs. They may not require having a college degree, but they do definitely require some degree of technical knowledge. So I think the long-term STEM education, and I think even in the short to mid-term, there is more of an onus on companies to think about training employees. If you're not, especially if we find that we're going to reduce the number of folks coming from outside the US to take those jobs, we are going to be reliant to bring our workforce up to those skills.